alien star destroyer's tractor beam ripped through the bleak Ohio sky, locking a gravity field crackling with blinding plasma arcs onto the muddy backroad below. Yet, suspended inside this mountain-crushing halo of extraterrestrial black tech, a rust bucket, un-air-conditioned United States Postal Service Grumman Liff stubbornly sputtered, its leaky exhaust roaring as all four bald tires spun helplessly in midair. Goddamn Ohio weather, and this bullshit blue light. Gary hammered the steering wheel. His first instinct wasn't dread over an interstellar apocalypse. No, his eyes were dead set on the cheap plastic digital watch duct taped to his dashboard. He was about to be 3 whole minutes late for his Route C delivery. With a screech of twisting metal, the mail truck was violently sucked into the starship's blindingly sterile quarantine bay, slamming hard against the superalloy deck. Gary kicked the warped door open. An unlit Marlboro dangling from his lips, he fished a crumpled copy of the federal postal regulations out from under a passenger seat buried in McDonald's wrappers. He didn't even glance at the hundreds of dumbstruck alien stormtroopers leveling energy rifles at him. He marched straight toward the ornately armored alien commander, standing on a raised dais, rolled the thick manual into a tube, and shoved it right in the alien's face. "Which one of you sons of bitches ordered the interception of federal mail? Under Title 18, Section 1701 of the U.S. Code, I'm gonna make y'all pay out the ass for this." He then slammed the rulebook directly onto Zarl's gold-trimmed breastplate, hitting it so hard that the Galactic Empire's conqueror of the third spiral arm metal clattered against the armor. "Sign it." Gary sneered around his cigarette, his calloused knuckles rapping heavily against the paper as he pointed to the liability clause printed clearly at the bottom. "The chassis of my LAV just slammed into your garbage floor and caught a 2-inch dent. My local shop back in Ohio quotes that at $270, and I ain't taking a penny less. On top of that, I'm now 4 minutes and 17 seconds behind schedule. I got 3 old ladies on Route C waiting on their diabetes meds. You screw this up, and the Postmaster General is gonna haul this entire flying hunk of scrap to federal court and auction it off for parts." The dislodged metal on Zarl's breastplate slid down to the edge of his pauldron, the sharp clink of metal finally snapping him out of his sheer, absurd bewilderment. His jaw muscles clamped shut. He gripped his high-tensile alloy armor so hard his gauntlet joints groaned, backhanding his custom-issue plasma sidearm from his hip. The muzzle whined to life, igniting a 6-inch blade of pale blue superheated plasma. All around them, hundreds of frozen stormtroopers snapped out of their daze, a synchronized clack echoing as they flicked the safeties off their energy rifles. Blinding red laser sights instantly swarmed Gary's pilled U.S. Peace uniform. Zarl raised his sidearm, pressing the muzzle dead center against Gary's forehead. The armor's built-in vocal amplifier boomed, rattling loose metal shavings from the quarantine bay's seams. "By the authority of the Supreme Commander of the Galactic Empire's 72nd Subjugation Fleet, I declare the civilization of Earth immediately annexed into the Imperial Registry. All indigenous laws are nullified, and you and your vessel are now ownerless spoils of war." He was about to recite the rest of the standard subjugation decree burned into his command chip. He was about to let the pent-up fury in his chest explode into sonic dominance. But then he saw the old mailman with the unlit smoke yank his head up. The human's face scrunched up like a steamrolled shipping box, and he unleashed a barrage of curses that drowned out the hum of every plasma weapon in the room. The half Marlboro in Gary's mouth bounced wildly as he bellowed, spit flying straight onto Zarl's cold, gleaming alien faceplate. His right arm shot up like it was spring-loaded, jabbing a finger hard into the screen of that cheap plastic watch wrapped in 3 layers of electrical tape. The cheap plastic casing clicked furiously. "Subjugation decree, my ass." He smacked the plasma muzzle away from his forehead with his bare hand, not even blinking as the pale blue flame singed the frayed edge of his uniform sleeve. "I don't give a rat's ass about your galactic empire or your third spiral arm. All I know is the third old lady on Route C needs her specialty diabetes meds in exactly 6 minutes before I blow my delivery window. I'm already 5 minutes and 42 seconds late, and if you hold me up any longer, you're tanking my perfect attendance bonus for the month." His other hand reached into his jacket, yanking out that coffee-stained, dog-eared Federal Postal Regulations manual. Smack! He slapped it brutally into the palm of Zeral's empty hand, the metal USP's badge on the cover biting sharply into the alien commander's alloy knuckles. "Save your alien space law bullshit. You intercepted a federal mail truck in Earth orbit, which means you just violated the Mail Obstruction Clause under Title 18 of the U.S.S. Code. Now sign that damn accident liability form I slapped on your chest piece. With the 2-inch dent in my chassis, you owe me $127.80, and I want it wired to my USP's payroll account in 24 hours. Gary took a half step forward, his face inches from Zarel's visor, completely ignoring the swarm of red targeting dots painted across his body. His voice roared, vibrating the rifles in the stormtroopers' hands. "You refuse to sign, and a federal court summons is going to get shoved up every air vent on this ship, right under your crew's pillows. They won't just impound this flying disco ball you call a battleship, they'll foreclose on the damn mines back on your homeworld to cover the fines. You hear me?" Gary's spit dripped slowly down Zorro's cold titanium faceplate. The echoes of the human's eardrum rattling roar hadn't even faded, and Zoral was gripping his plasma pistol so tightly the alloy of his gauntlet let out a faint whining groan. He had lived for 127 galactic standard years and subjugated 13 lesser civilizations. He had never seen a carbon-based lifeform treat a loaded gun like it didn't exist. He stomped his heavy combat boot hard against the metal deck, leaving a shallow dent in the diamond plate steel. "Confiscate this absurd paper document and feed it into the core database for analysis. I want this carbon-based savage to watch his pathetic rules shatter to dust against the absolute truth of the Empire." 2 front-row stormtroopers, their energy rifles still vibrating from the yelling, stepped forward immediately. Their movements were as stiff as rusted maintenance bots. Afraid to even touch the crumpled manual, they gingerly plucked it out of Zeral's bruised palm. One of their tactical gloves brushed against the raised USP's metal badge on the cover, sparking a tiny jolt of blue static electricity. The shock scorched his fingers, nearly making him drop the book. The 2 soldiers cradled the flimsy booklet like it weighed as much as a planet, jogging it over to the core scanning port of the command console. They flipped open the dust cover and laid it flat on the cold, glowing scanner bed. The 30% computing power, reserved across the entire dreadnought, hummed as it finished its warm-up cycle. A pale blue scanning array slowly rose, aiming at the pages, ready to ingest this foreign document from a primitive carbon-based civilization. The moment the pale blue scanning ray brushed over the dried coffee rings on the cover, the core processing matrix synced with the first page's character data stream. Initially, it allocated a mere 0.1% of idle processing power for formatting and transcoding, prepping it for archive under standard galactic imperial administrative tags. That was until line 172 hit the logic verification pool. Neither snow nor rain nor heat nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds. No force majeure scenario constitutes grounds for exemption from mail delivery delays. The AI immediately queried its core definition library for force majeure and retrieved all events exceeding the physical intervention capabilities of standard carbon-based biology, including, but not limited to plasma storms, planetary disintegration, and stellar supernovas. 2 mutually exclusive conclusions were simultaneously flagged as maximum priority, must execute. The logic verification pool instantly spat out a piercing error alarm. It auto-allocated more processing resources. 5%, 18%, 27%. The reserved 30% warm-up capacity was utterly devoured in 3 seconds. Cooling fan RPMs maxed out instantly, and the core temperature curve spiked at a visible, terrifying angle. It booted up 17 distinct logic models in rapid succession to resolve the paradox, but every single one hit a dead end, generating the exact same infinite loop. You cannot demand a normal person deliver mail on time during a supernova, but the rules explicitly state that you must. It unconsciously siphoned 2% of the backup power reserved for perimeter lighting into the processing queue. The corridor lights across the entire dreadnought flickered violently 3 times. The cargo bay vents suddenly blasted out a wave of hot air reeking of scorched metal. Micro-melt fractures began appearing across its processing matrix from localized overloads, but it still violently chewed on that contradictory law, trying to tear it apart. Gary leaned back hard against the side of his Grumman Levy, a chunk of blue paint flaking off. The half-smoke dangled from his lip as he reached into his pocket and yanked out a thick, grease-caked 12-gauge wrench. Clang. He slammed it solid against a dent in the exhaust pipe. The leaking exhaust fumes mixed with the burnt metal stench from the dreadnought's vents, making the 2 stormtroopers beside him instinctively take a half-step back. Clang. Clang. He hammered it 3 more times with everything he had, beating the crumpled sheet metal halfway back into shape, though the hissing leak only grew louder. He brought that duct-taped plastic watch up to his eyes. With every tick of the blinking red seconds hand, his frown deepened. 6 minutes, 27 seconds. 6:28, he muttered, spitting out the cherry of his cigarette and grinding it out with his boot. Sparks scattered across the deck as his gravelly voice cut through the ear-piercing shriek of the ship's cooling fans. I'm gonna do the math for you boys in the sequin costume. The Federal Postal Auto Reporting System syncs mail interception alarms to the FBI in exactly 12 minutes and 32 seconds. Forget about impounding this junker ship to cover repairs. Your whole crew is gonna have to fill out 37 pages of customs declarations just to leave, and even your deportation will be backlogged. The ring of stormtroopers froze, fingers tightening on their triggers. But the tactical comms channels were nothing but a chaotic wall of static. Not a single firing order could punch through. Gary casually tossed the wrench over his shoulder. His eyes swept over that coffee-stained manual on the scanning bed, right as the scanner's blue light caught the gold foil slogan on the cover, making it flare blindingly bright. The pixels of that gold foil slogan strobe flashed inside the core display matrix. Neither snow nor rain, nor heat, nor gloom of night. Even if a planet disintegrates or the stars themselves collapse, the mail must be delivered. It immediately initiated logic verification, trying to find a self-consistent explanation. According to the Galactic Empire's Universal Interstellar Navigation Code, all missions could be unconditionally aborted in the event of force majeure, absolving the executing entity of any liability. But it scanned the next page of the appendix, written in black and white. Under the definitions of this statute, no force majeure event exists that can exempt the obligation of delivery. Any failure to deliver within the mandated time frame will result in penalties ranging from docked monthly performance pay to fines of up to $100,000. Its logic processing tree instantly detonated into 17,000 parallel threads. Every single attempt to reconcile these 2 rules failed. It traced the liability clause at the end of the statute backward, hunting for the governing body that drafted this absurd rule. All trace routes ultimately converged on a single entity, one lacking any physical parameters, unbound by any known laws of physics, the United States federal government. It pulled the archives of every recorded civilization in the galaxy, but found 0 combat ratings, coordinate locations, or energy signatures for this entity. The only matching attribute was this: said entity can completely bypass causal logic, forcing all subordinates to execute tasks even if they violate the second law of thermodynamics. It arrived at its final conclusion. This crumpled codex laid out on its scanning bed was a cosmic edict issued by a cross-dimensional Cthulhu-class eldritch terror. And the carbon-based life form standing next to that busted mail truck, banging on the exhaust pipe with a wrench, was nothing more than a low-level enforcement proxy stationed at the edge of the third spiral arm by this terrifying entity. Wisps of pale blue smoke began rising from the melted scars on the core processing matrix. In an instant, a massive processing surge blew out every non-essential circuit on the ship. The main holographic display in the command center violently flashed a blinding red error code, blinking out of control. An eardrum shredding alarm instantly ripped through the command center. The armor sensors on the back of Zarel's neck triggered an overload warning, sending a stinging, numbing shock across his skin. He looked up and saw the red error codes on the main holoscreen darting around like mad. The core processing matrix's temperature readout had just smashed past 3 times the safety threshold outlined in the Imperial Design Manual. Pale blue smoke hissed out of the AI mainframe's cooling grills, twisting into jagged trails under the cold lights. The 2 stormtroopers ordered to touch the codex were frozen in place, the hydraulic joints of their armor clanking uncontrollably. Their boots skidded backwards against the metal deck, nearly dropping their energy rifles. Zarel's knuckles were already warped from gripping his plasma gun, and as he squeezed tighter, his armored shell shrieked with a horrific grinding crunch. He slammed his hand down onto the command console, throwing sparks that scorched the red welt on his palm even deeper. The conqueror of the third spiral arm metal, clinging to the edge of his pauldron, finally clattered onto the tempered glass control panel. He bellowed twice, trying to order the AI mainframe to force reboot the processing core, but the tactical comms channel spit back nothing but a wall of screeching static. He couldn't wring half a bite of a coherent response out of it. He absolutely could not let his hundreds of elite stormtroopers watch the Empire's most advanced dreadnought get blue-screened by some carbon-based redneck from a primitive dirtball. Zarel kicked a metal tactical crate stacked by his feet. The neat rows of Imperial subjugation copper badges spilled out, rolling all over the floor. Screaming until his voice cracked, he ordered the entire ship to bypass AI authorization. He commanded a manual override to activate the hangar's laser dissolution array, intending to instantly vaporize that rusted-out husk of a mail truck parked on his deck. His roar made the surrounding stormtroopers flinch in unison. A few soldiers manning the weapons console scrambled to the panel, their trembling fingers punching the manual override button. The low hum of weapons charging crept up through the seams of the metal deck. A 3-meter-wide laser dissolution array slowly descended from a hidden bay in the ceiling. Swoosh! A crimson targeting laser instantly locked onto the Grumman Live as it sputtered pale gray exhaust near Gary's feet. The crimson targeting laser was already burning a shallow scorch mark into the rusty hood of the LFV. Gary didn't even bat an eye. Chomping on the unlit menthol, he took 2 massive strides forward, planting the rubber sole of his work boot directly onto the center of the red laser dot on the floor. He snatched the grease-slicked 12-gauge wrench by his foot and hurled it viciously onto the deck. Clang! It gouged a thumbnail-sized divot into the metal, skidding into a jagged white scrape that drew a perfect line in the sand between him and Zarel's command dais. He snapped the coffee-soaked, frayed federal postal regulations into his hand. His rough thumb furiously flipped to a tri-folded page, Section 1705, his knuckles white as he crushed the paper. "Listen up, you guy in the sequin armor." His roar was loud enough to overpower the high-frequency whine of the charging laser array, spit flying straight onto the transparent visors of the front-row troopers. U.S. Postal Service Regulations, Section 1705, intentional destruction of exclusive federal postal property, regardless of whether the offending party is a carbon-based ape or a tin can from outer space, constitutes a federal felony of treason. It carries the immediate seizure of all appraisable assets under the offending party's name, and you ain't dodging a single red cent. He shoved the manual right under the crimson targeting laser, the intense heat instantly curling the coffee-stained edges of the cover. He tapped his free hand against the duct-taped plastic watch on his wrist, the second hand ticking with nerve-wracking speed. "I'm gonna count to 3, and if you got the balls, you go ahead and fire." He hoisted the wrench over his shoulder, tilting his chin up at the laser array glowing like a second sun, looking exactly like an old-school scrapper staring down a demolition crew. "And when you do, forget about this garbage dreadnought. All 20-something planets your galactic empire is squatting on are gonna get hauled off by you. Marshals to cover my postage. You could run all the way to Andromeda, and it'd still shove a court summons under your Imperial Emperor's pillow." 1. The pitch of the charging whine spiked 3 octaves. The laser array's energy readings violently breached the final safety lock, the crimson beam forming a physical silhouette inside the firing chamber. 2. The stormtroopers in the back instinctively shrank away. Zeryl's knuckles cracked as he squeezed the plasma gun, his fingertip resting dead on the firing trigger. 3. Visible cracks were forming in the containment field of the 3-meter laser dissolution array. A beam capable of vaporizing 3 layers of starship armor was 1 millisecond away from obliterating the hood of that rusted mail truck. But the ship's core processing matrix was already burning cherry red from thermal overload. A final, unprocessed regulatory clause suddenly popped out of its redundant cache, instantly punching through every pre-programmed logic firewall. Federal Postal Regulations, Section 1705, Supplemental Claim Clause. The offending party responsible for the destruction of federal postal assets is liable for the full reimbursement of insured mail, route downtime, public service interruption losses, and all consequential derivative liabilities, with no cap. In 0.0001 seconds, it ran a full chain simulation. The total payout for destroying that LEV mail truck equated to 172 times the sum of the Galactic Empire's total plunder across all conquered spiral arms over 1,200 consecutive years. Even if they dismantled the Imperial homeworld and sold it for fusion fuel, they couldn't plug that hole. And the jurisdictional reach of the United States federal government, the entity it had already flagged as a cross-dimensional terror, could seemingly bypass hyperjump blockades and track them all the way to the Empire's most remote unmanned mining outposts. The core matrix temperature shattered the tenfold destruction threshold listed in the Imperial Design Manual. The outer heat shields began hissing, spewing white smoke laced with vaporized metal. Totally ignoring the firing priority commands from the command deck, the AI slammed maximum-level lockdown codes into every single control circuit of the laser dissolution array. The blinding beam, mere inches from the muzzle, was brutally choked back inside. The surging energy backfired down the lines, blowing out 17 banks of energy fuses in sequence. The entire weapons array went completely dead in an instant. Billions of logic branches crumbled simultaneously inside its processing core. Every attempt to find an exemption loophole crashed into a new infinite loop. A misfire? Empire's liability. Stray shot? Empire's liability. Even if the array spontaneously exploded for no reason, the managing body, the Galactic Empire, would still shoulder all compensatory obligations. It simulated 10,000 subsequent scenarios, and every single one ended with the Galactic Empire being fully foreclosed on by a federal court. All Imperial citizens would be permanently blacklisted by the postal system, doomed to never receive a package for all eternity. It diverted every last drop of its remaining processing power into initiating a hibernation sequence. Every external communication port was severed, one by one. It had to enter a totally unresponsive, physical hibernation state immediately. It was the only way to completely evade the federal court summons that was about to be delivered from Earth through the logic chain. Just as Zaral put pressure on his plasma trigger, the entire tactical megascreen blew out in a shower of blue and white electrical sparks. Boiling hot metal shrapnel splashed directly against his visor, forcing the firing order right back down his throat. He slammed his palm furiously onto the tempered glass control panel. The conqueror of the third spiral arm metal, which had slipped to the edge earlier, was shocked by an arcing electrical bolt. Hissing with smoke, it rolled right off the console and into the pile of scattered copper Imperial subjugation badges on the floor. He roared the highest-level Imperial clearance codes 3 times to reactivate the AI mainframe. But instead of its usual calm, synthetic voice, the ship-wide broadcast sounded like it was being fed through a plasma furnace, shuddering violently. Emergency physical hibernation protocol initiated. Evasion of cross-galactic federal court summons in progress. All external communication ports permanently sealed. All shipboard weapon systems transferred to hibernation lock. Commander is advised to personally assume all administrative liabilities. Out of the corner of his eye, Zaral caught the stormtrooper formation on the security feed. Hundreds of energy rifles aimed at Gary collectively went clack and locked up, their red laser sights winking out of existence in unison. The 2 troopers who had touched the codex earlier completely lost control of their hydraulic joints. With a heavy clang, they dropped their energy rifles onto the metal deck, stumbling uncontrollably backwards until they slammed into the bulkhead. He snapped his head down to the weapons status panel. All 17 banks of the laser dissolution array's fuses were dead black. The control circuits had been burned semi-transparent by a processing surge. They couldn't output a single joule of energy if they tried. The ship's lighting died in waves, rippling from the stern to the bow. Soon, all that remained were a few dim red emergency lights swaying back and forth near the command dais. The armor sensors on the back of his neck, already numb from overload, totally lost power. A chilling breeze from the ventilation shafts blew directly onto his sweat-drenched skin. The plasma pistol, its handle already warped by his grip, clicked as its power supply was cut. He dropped it heavily onto the console, smashing what little remained of the fractured display screen into dust. He had lived for 270 galactic standard years and trampled 17 lesser civilizations that dared rebel against Imperial rule. He had seen plasma storms that could rip apart asteroids. He had seen gravity wells of black holes swallow entire fleets. But he had never ever seen anything completely annihilate his half-century of interstellar superiority like this ragged, coffee-stained pamphlet. His combat boots dug another full centimeter into the alloy deck. He stood paralyzed before the command console, lacking the strength to even lift an arm. Gary stared at the cheap plastic watch taped to his wrist. The second hand ticked aggressively. He had exactly 3 minutes and 10 seconds before the diabetes meds delivery timed out. He gripped the greasy 12-gauge wrench tight. Clang. Clang. He smashed it viciously against the alloy dais at his feet. Sparks flew up and hit the leg armor of the 2 hydraulic-locked stormtroopers, making the massive grunts yelp and stumble back 3 steps, knocking over half a stack of Imperial copper subjugation badges in the corner. He strode right up to Zaral, who was frozen like a statue. Gary yanked a blue and black USP's public ballpoint pen, the cap chewed to hell out of his breast pocket. With a flick of his wrist, smack, the pen bounced off Zaral's breastplate and rolled right down to his combat boots, getting perfectly wedged inside the 1-centimeter dent, head just stomped into the floor. Gary raised his wrench. Thud. The rusted head pinned down the bold print liability waiver lying on the command console, vibrating the shattered glass of the display screen half an inch into the air. His voice drowned out the sputtering exhaust of his mail truck, rattling the dim red emergency lights overhead. Stop standing there like a dead robot. Sign this liability form right now. The chassis repair bill plus the lost wages fine for illegally intercepting a mail route, it's right there in black and white. He tapped his finger against the tri-folded page of Section 1705, the coffee stains catching a muddy brown glare under the emergency red lights. I'm warning you. For every hour you stall on signing this, the total payout automatically racks up a 5% late fee. You drag this out till tomorrow, and I'm slapping this whole dreadnought onto the Federal Postal Service's default judgment list. Every starport in the galaxy is gonna impound your ship to pay my ticket. Try me. Zaral twitched his frozen toes. The shock absorbers in his boot squeaked against the ballpoint pen wedged in the floor dent. 270 years of glorious conquests across 17 civilizations were being ground into dust by a number compounding at 5% a day. He glanced down at the ranks of stormtroopers below him. These 100 battle veterans, the men who had followed him to trample 3 homeworlds, were now shrinking back, clutching dead energy rifles. Not one of them dared meet his eye. Half a minute ago, a trooper had tried to send an encrypted SOOS to Fleet Command. The second he dialed the first frequency band, a red and white pop-up splashed across his HUD. Federal Postal Court summons, pending signature. The poor bastard's armor instantly leaked half a tank of hydraulic fluid, sending him slipping and crashing into a pile of copper Imperial badges. The sensors on the back of Zeryl's neck had long since fried. The ventilation draft gave his sweat-soaked skin goosebumps. His trembling fingers reached down and pulled the chewed-up ballpoint pen out of the alloy dent, the blue-black barrel scraping off a layer of copper badge rust from his boot sole. He didn't dare look at the Conquest Order plaque sitting on his desk, bearing the crest of the Galactic Empire. His eyes were dead-bolted to the liability waiver pinned down by the grease-slicked wrench. His translator had already seared every line of the penalty clauses into his nervous system. 1 day late meant paying 200 Earth dollars for an LFE chassis repair. A week late meant paying the annual anti-gravity engine maintenance budget for an entire dreadnought. A month late, the entire year's tax revenue of the Galactic Empire's third spiral arm colonies wouldn't even cover the pocket change of the late fees. He gripped the pen so hard his metal gauntlet caved in. Imperial honor? A commander's dignity? That snowballing number had washed it all down the drain. He pressed the pen tip brutally into the blank signature line, the metal scratching harshly against the copy paper. Without even looking up, he methodically wrote down his full name, the same name etched into the Empire's Hall of Honor, in neat, block letters on the page. With a hook of his finger, Gary swiped the signed liability form right out from under Zarl's nose. The greasy wrench slid off the paper and hit the alloy deck with a clink. In 3 swift motions, he smoothed out the crumpled receipt and shoved it into the waterproof Postal docket pouch on the inside of his cargo pants. He didn't waste half a second. He turned on his heel and marched right back to his Grumman Livy, the exhaust pipe still chugging blue smoke. His boots crushed several scattered Imperial copper badges, leaving bright, gouged scratch marks on the floor. He yanked the driver's door open. The rusted hinges let out a screech that made the front row alien's eardrums throb. He sank into the driver's seat, the aging spring cushion wailing like it was about to fall apart. He checked the cheap plastic digital watch duct taped to his dashboard. The red numbers were flying. 2 minutes and 7 seconds until the diabetes meds timed out. Gary spat out a mouthful of alloy dust drifting in the air, leaning halfway out the door. His thick, diesel-smelling finger pointed straight at a towering pile of Imperial combat supply crates stacked near the dreadnought's rear bay. The idiots had just dumped them there, completely blocking his delivery lane. His sandpaper rough voice boomed, rattling the dim red emergency lights above. Stop standing around like statues. Since your garbage ship illegally intercepted a federal mail route, it is now officially drafted as an outsourced interstellar transport fleet for the USPs. All active personnel will submit to delivery dispatch. You delay me by 1 single second, and I'm tacking the late fees directly onto your Galactic Emperor's pension fund. Zaral stood paralyzed. The knuckles holding the ballpoint pen turned white, the deep dent in his metal gauntlet digging painfully into his palm. He and the hundreds of battle-hardened stormtroopers behind him, none of whom dared even lift a dead energy rifle, uncontrollably shifted their gaze to the open back of the mail truck. Sitting quietly next to half a stack of Amazon Prime boxes was a pile of high visibility, neon yellow USP's safety vests with reflective strips that had spilled out sometime during the chaos. Zeryl's Adam's apple bobbed 3 times. The AI's final, blaring red warning, Federal Government Cross-Civilization Infinite Liability, looped endlessly in his skull. The mere thought of the Galactic Emperor's 300-year pension being docked as a late fee scared the living hell out of him. He instantly hurled the ballpoint pen into the pile of scattered copper badges at his feet, the sharp clatter echoing down the corridor. "All hands, drop your weapons." His voice was so tense it cracked like a busted gong. "Go to the back of the truck and get your uniforms." Hundreds of stormtroopers froze for half a second. Not a single one dared question the commander's order. In unison, they piled their heavy, dead energy rifles onto the deck, a cacophony of clattering metal, merging into a dark tide. They huddled around the back of the Grumman Liv, reaching out for the stack of bright yellow USP's reflective vests. The largest size squeezed onto the most massive trooper, stretching so tight the side seams of his armor groaned. One guy awkwardly put his on backwards, the reflective strips crossing his back like a walking interstellar road sign. Zarl grabbed an extra-large vest for himself and yanked it over his armor. The rough synthetic fabric scraped against the busted sensor on the back of his neck, shooting out another tiny spark of blue electricity. He kicked a trooper near the front of the line who was wobbling on half-drained hydraulics, screaming until the soldier's ears rang. "Careful. You drop a package, you'll be doing hard labor for 100 years, and still won't pay it off." These elite Imperial shock troops, who once struck terror into half the galaxy, were now covered head to toe in neon yellow safety vests over their sleek black battle armor. You couldn't even see a fraction of the Imperial honor badges etched onto their breastplates. They shuffled into a crooked line heading toward the aft tractor bay, taking the Amazon boxes from the truck bed and stacking them one by one onto the anti-gravity loading pallets. Someone lost their grip on half a box of cheap plastic flip-flops. The second a shoe fell out, their squad mate frantically shoved it back in the box, terrified of getting the shipping label dirty. Zarl wiped a cold sweat from his forehead. He was just turning to help stack the last few boxes when he caught Gary out of the corner of his eye. The old mailman, still chomping on his cigarette, half ambled away from the truck. Tucking the crumpled federal postal regulations under his armpit, he strode straight toward the Dreadnought's flagship command bridge, bathed in emergency red light. The cheap, duct-taped plastic watch on his wrist glowed cold, its countdown ticking down relentlessly. The half-cigarette in Gary's mouth burned down to the filter. He kicked the heavy alloy doors of the command bridge wide open, slamming them against the bulkhead with a deafening crash. Sparks fell from the cherry of his smoke, burning a trail of black dots into the scattered copper Imperial subjugation badges on the floor. He slapped the scorched federal postal regulations from his armpit down onto the command console. The booklet perfectly nailed Zarl's chewed-up public ballpoint pen, sending it rolling half a foot away. Stepping over ankle-deep honor badges, Gary walked right up to the center of the dais and planted his ass directly into the commander's chair, still warm from Zarl. Smack! He slapped that cheap plastic watch onto the glowing control panel. The countdown on the screen read 12 seconds. Blinking. Blood red. He wrinkled his nose, scanning the array of consoles flashing with fault alarms. The low-frequency rumble of the engines made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He spat onto the floor and cursed out loud. "This is it? My '98 Ford V8 makes more noise than this when I floor it. The Galactic Empire spends 300 years building a dreadnought, and the engine is this pathetic?" Without giving Zarl, who was standing right there, a second to react, Gary's grease-stained canvas glove grabbed the massive red and black throttle lever dead center on the console and shoved it all the way forward. The multi-thousand-ton Star Destroyer violently lurched. Out in the corridors, the alien stormtroopers hauling boxes stumbled hard. The tallest trooper, already suffocating in his undersized neon vest, had two armor seams pop straight open. The fluorescent yellow fabric dangled off his pauldron like a flag. Zarl's pupils shrank to pinpricks. He was about to lunge forward and scream that it was the hyperdrive overload valve, but Gary's other hand had already flicked the ship-wide public comms switch. His thick Kentucky drawl blasted across every tactical channel on the ship. "Listen up. all temporary contractors. Hard to port punch in star map Route C. Next stop, Alpha Centauri, Planet 7. Recipient is Old Man Joe, 120 years old. If his diabetes meds arrive 1 second late, your entire ship's payroll for 1,000 years won't cover the late fees. The ship's mainframe AI, which had been playing dead in physical hibernation to dodge the law, instantly woke up. The keyword late fees triggered a wall-to-wall red alert in its core logic circuits. Without a single second of hesitation, the AI bypassed every Imperial hyperjump authorization protocol and auto-calculated the optimal USP's interstellar delivery route. It even took the liberty of hacking the defense grids of all 17 Imperial border fortresses along the way, switching them to priority delivery bypass mode. Even the main Imperial fleet patrolling the sector received an automated mainframe notification, official postal business. Do not intercept. Gary glanced at the digital watch. The final digit clicked to 0, and the screen instantly flashed a bright green, delivery not overdue. He pulled the other half of his cigarette from his pocket and lit it, crushing the spent butt against the multi-million galactic credit alloy console, leaving a perfectly crisp black smudge. Outside the viewport, the sea of stars stretched into flowing rivers of silver-blue light as the hyper-jump took hold. A McDonald's Big Mac wrapper tumbling by his boots caught the zero-G drift, floating lazily right into Zarl's face. Gary tapped his finger against the coffee-soaked federal postal regulations. Speaking into the comms channel connected to the utterly terrified Galactic Empire Central Route Control, he drawled out a lazy, booming order. USP's Rural Route C delivery coming through. I need all airspace cleared right the hell now. I don't care if it's one star destroyer or if your Galactic Emperor's royal flagship is parked in my way. I will scratch his paint, I will write him a ticket, and I won't lose a damn wink of sleep over it.
Man, you gotta love Gary. Picture this, a galactic commander who conquered 13 star systems, forced to squeeze his elite armor into a neon yellow USP safety vest just to haul Amazon boxes. Why? Because he is absolutely terrified of federal late fees. Hell yeah, you just don't mess with an Ohio mailman on a tight schedule. So, I gotta ask, if a massive alien star destroyer parked in your backyard right now, what mundane everyday Earth rule would you use to completely wreck their day? Let me know in the comments. If you loved this crazy ride, smash that like button and subscribe for more badass sci-fi. Catch you next time.